This video from Introduction to Functions starts with some of the different types of functions that we utilize quite often in mathematics. So the first type of function that you spent a lot of time on in Algebra 1 was a linear function. A linear function was any graph of a straight line. The linear function might have a positive slope, as this particular graph does. Positive slope meant that the graph went up from left to right. It could have a negative slope. This was a graph who went down from left to right. We have a special type of linear function called the constant function. The constant function was the graph of a horizontal line. Its slope was 0, and this was a special case of a linear function. We also have vertical lines. Vertical lines are the ones whose slope was called undefined. The thing is that they're not functions, so I'm not going to talk about them here. Another special case of linear functions was something called an identity function. The identity function is specifically the graph of y equals x. The reason it's the graph of y equals x is because first I want you to notice that it goes through the origin. The other graphs I drew up here did not pass through the origin. Remember, the origin is the ordered pair 0, 0. And the reason it's called origin is because it's often a beginning point when we're plotting ordered pairs on a coordinate plane. But the other thing that's special about the identity function is any input is the same as the output. In other words, if you plug in -3 for x, then y is -3. If you plug in -2 for x, y is -2. If you plug in 0 for x, y is 0. If you plug in 5 for x, the output is 5. The next type of function is called the quadratic function. The quadratic function is one that has a U shape when you graph it. We have a special name for that. It's called a parabola. Parabolas could open up like a U, but they can also be upside down. As long as they have that shape, it's a quadratic function. The next type of function is the absolute value function. The absolute value function has a lot of similar properties to the quadratic function in that the V could open up, the V could open down. The equation is going to have an absolute value symbol in it. Remember, the absolute value symbol is the one with the bars. The thing that's special about absolute values is whatever number you plug into an absolute value, the output is positive. So if you do the absolute value of -3, you get +3. And the absolute value of +3 is also +3. The next type of function is going to be a square root function. The square root function has a shape that looks like this. Square root. The graph could also look like this. It looks like a sideways 1/2 of a parabola. In other words, if I were to continue this, that would be a parabola that opens to the right. But we only see half of it. And that's what the square root function looks like. And the last type of function that we're going to talk about is a power or exponential function. The power or exponential function looks like this. There are some special properties that go along with it, such as the graph looks like it's heading towards the x-axis, but it's not going to actually touch the x-axis. So for right now, I want you to be able to memorize the shapes of these graphs and tell me which type they are: linear, quadratic, absolute value, square root, or exponential.